So, in my first Little Nightmares 2 theory video, I talked about the school and what I believe happened in the school before the events of the second game. Now, a bunch of you have commented, and I really enjoy going through the comments and reading all of your theories. Some agree with mine, some disagree, and I love all of the different opinions. This is one of the best things about Little Nightmares as a franchise, is that nothing is really truly confirmed. Everything is open to interpretation, and some of you agree with my interpretation, and some of you don't, and I love that discussion we're having down in the comments below. However, I have more evidence to back up some of the claims that I made in that video, and I'm going to go over that now, and I'm also going to debunk some of the debunking that happened in the comments in my previous video, because as much as I love people's different opinions, I do think a lot of people have tried to debunk one of the things that I said in that video, but haven't really given enough proper evidence to truly debunk that yet, and I have even more evidence to back up my theories from that video, which I'm going to display in this one. If it isn't already obvious, there's going to be massive spoilers in this video for Little Nightmares 1, the DLC, and Little Nightmares 2, so if you haven't played all of the games and you're worried about spoilers, I would honestly go play them before you watch this video, but then come back and let me know all of your juicy little theories. So the main one that I want to talk about from my first video is the theory that Six has been at the school before. Now, a bunch of people have tried to debunk this, and that's great. I love that you guys are coming up with your own theories and looking for clues. This is fantastic. However, a lot of the debunking doesn't really have a lot of weight, and I want to go through some of the main debunks that I've seen in the comments, and I just want to give my opinion on why those aren't necessarily correct. But as I said, I just want to reiterate just one more time, nothing is confirmed in these games. The only people that really know what's going on is the developers, and even then, we don't know if they have an overarching storyline between the whole franchise. They could just be making it up as they go along. I don't think that's true, but you never know. So, in the first video, I said that I believe Six has been in the school before. Now, one of the biggest pieces of evidence I gave for this was the fact that you could see these tally marks in this room where somebody has clearly been held, and then you could also see tally marks in Six's room in the Hunter's Island. Now, as some people have very correctly pointed out, this isn't the only time we see tally marks in the Little Nightmares 2 era. We see them in the comics too. Now, most people have pointed out that you see them in the hospital comic with the girl with the bloody nose, the girl with the pigtails, I don't know what she's called. I'm going to call her number 3 though, and we're going to come back to that later. But number 3 is in this hospital, and you see that she's in a cell, and she digs her way out with the spoon. Remember the spoon. We're coming back to the spoon. So she's digging her way out of the room, and she appears to be marking days on the wall with the spoon until she finally cracks through into the next room when she opens up, and then she sees the whole room is just full of tally marks. Now, we see that number 3 appears to get caught here and appears to die. We don't know, it's not confirmed, but it seems that way. However, if you look at this room here, it's clearly showing number 3 is not the only person who uses tally marks. Somebody else uses them. Now, this could be part of the whole time loop theory that a lot of people are talking about, which I have a slightly different take on, which I'm going to make a video as soon as I can, but I have a slightly different take. So it could be a time loop thing, but the reason why I don't think that this is a time loop is if it was a time loop, wouldn't the tunnel already have been dug, so she wouldn't need to dig it again? But there we go. It seems that somebody else is also doing tally marks. Now, this could be Six, this could be somebody else, but let's go back to the original room which I claimed Six was held in. Now, if you look at this room again, you can see that there is a spoon on the floor. Somebody has clearly dug their way out of this wall, kind of like in The Great Escape. This does seem to point that this was actually number 3 that was held here, or does it? And this is where it gets a little bit complicated. If you look at this entire scene, we can see that this was clearly an escape attempt. Somebody in the last video tried to say that somebody actually broke into the school with the bed sheets, and I'm going to debunk that right now. But you can see here, somebody was in this room for an amount of time, and they dug out with the spoon. Now, once they escaped this room, if you go into the very next room, you see a bunch of beds that have bed sheets missing. Well, where did they go? Well, we know where they go. You can see them. They've been tied together, and that is how this person, whoever it was, managed to escape this room. Now, the person who escaped this room, if you follow the game backwards, the only way they could have really gone this way is towards the island. So I believe that the person who was trapped in this room made their way to the island, and we know that the pigtail girl, or number 3, she went to the hospital, which is the completely different direction. Now, I do want to caveat this by saying, obviously this is a game, and game has to go in a linear fashion because that's how video games work. It's entirely possible that the the actual world isn't set up from left to right like the world that we see is. We're only seeing the video game version of it, so it is entirely possible that she did escape this way and then she managed to make it to the hospital. But it still doesn't explain why there's somebody else doing tally marks in the room. Somebody's clearly putting those tally marks there, and it wasn't her in the second room, so who was it? So I don't personally believe that it was number 3 that escaped this way. I believe it was somebody else. Now, we also have to acknowledge that we can confirm that there was somebody else in the school, and that was the chubby kid, who I'm also going to call number 2. And we're going to come back to that very, very shortly. But the chubby kid, number 2, he was definitely in the school at one point. And we know this because we see him in the comic. We very clearly see him in the comic. He's in the school. He's smashing a bunch of the porcelain kids, or the bullies, with his lollipop. And then he tries to escape, but he seemingly gets caught by the teacher. And I think that's how he meets his end. So the bully kid was absolutely at the school, yeah. And some people try to use that as evidence to debunk my theory that 6 was at the school. However, this doesn't mean that number 2 was the only kid at the school. It really doesn't. There could have been multiple kids. I mean, what school only has one kid? That wouldn't make any sense. And so we don't know if there's been multiple children at this school, and I really don't think that it was number 2 who escaped this way, because if he did, then he wouldn't have got caught by the teacher. That wouldn't make sense in the comic. So if it wasn't him and it wasn't her, who was it? Well, it could have been this kid. We see a dead kid in the island who was clearly captured by the hunter, and it seems to have starved to death. So it absolutely could have been this child who escaped, but why would this whole elaborate setup be set up for just this random kid who we never get really any more sort of backstory for? And again, we still have to look at the fact that there are tally marks in 6's room and there are tally marks here, so I think the evidence more strongly points towards 6 than it being this random kid that's dead in the forest that we got a hat from. Now again, this isn't definitive proof. Nothing in these games are definitive proof, but I think the evidence more strongly suggests that it was 6 that was in the school doing the tally marks, not necessarily 6 that was tied up, but 6 was in the school at some point. And I have more evidence to support this that I'm going to show you now. Now, remember how I've been numbering these children? Well, the reason I've been doing that, if you look at the digital artwork that you get from the deluxe edition of the game, which I had to buy after doing these videos because I just had to have every single piece of information that I possibly could. But if you look at them, there are 6 children here and they are laid out in a number of order. Now, the reason why I think these children are laid out in order is if you look at the first one, that's mono. Now, a lot of people don't seem to have made this reference. I don't know why, but mono means one. Mono, monotone, monochrome, all of these words, the stem mono means one or singular or alone. Now this absolutely is a reference to Mono's tale if you think about it. At the end of the game, he is literally alone. He grows up alone. Mono makes sense, but I also think this means number 1 too. So if we take that logic and that mono is number 1, if we number these children like this, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm sure that I don't have to point out the logic here, but if you look at these children, all of these children appear in the comics aside from number 6. I really think this is 6, guys. I don't know if that's an obvious clue or not, but I really think that this little girl down here is 6. Now, if we're going to assume that this is 6, makes sense, she's the 6th child out of these ones, she's the only one we don't see in the comics. If this is 6, then why do I think this points towards 6 for being in the school before? Very simply, we see multiple photos of this girl in the school. Now, there's this one that I showed in the last video, which probably wasn't the best footage to show, honestly, but I found a much clearer and much better version of this up in the room, near the room where the chess kid was killed. Assumedly. There's a much clearer picture there, and you can see that this is clearly this girl here, who we are now assuming is number 6. So, why would there be a picture on the wall if 6 has never been here before? If you look at the photos or the photo frames that are in the school, every single photo, bar 1 or 2, appear to be people that have been here before. The only ones that aren't are the barber, which may be another video for that one, or this guy here with the twisted, warped face. Now, they could have been students from the past, but every other photo is of people that are at the school. We see the teacher multiple times, we see the porcelain kids multiple times, we also see this picture, which I still think is the original kids that the porcelain kids were modeled after, and then we see this random kid here, which could be Mono, and then we see this girl here that could be Six, and if you look at these in a line, there is also a picture missing. Now, we do see the picture of number 4 in here, and I cannot quite remember if we can see a picture of the chubby kid on number 2. I know we see the pictures of him elsewhere. It's really not much of a logical leap to assume that pictures of people here have been in this school before. I mean, why else would there be photographs of them if they've not been here before? So if that's the case, this clearly shows that Six has been at this school before, and while maybe the specifics of Six being here before aren't fully understood, and this still could feed into the loop theory that this whole place is in a time loop, and again, I have a whole theory about that one. I think people are very close to that one, but I don't think they've fully quite grasped it, and I think that I might. So another video for that one. It doesn't necessarily mean that Six was the one that was tied up in that room, but I definitely do think that Six managed to escape that way. Either that was her that escaped or she escaped after using those bed sheets, and she managed to escape this way towards the island, which is where she got caught by the hunter. Now, a few people have said, well, if she's been in the school before, why doesn't she recognize it? Which is interesting because I think that she does, and the reason why I think that she does is if you see, there is a very clear moment near one of the first traps. Six will put her foot up to the raised floorboard and she won't step on it. Now, this is obviously the developers trying to give you a hint. If you actually play through the game, you'll notice that Six often gives a lot of hints in her posture and of what to do. There's a couple of puzzles in the game that she will help you with by sort of gesturing, and this is definitely one of them. But how does she know that this is a trap? Is she just super clever, or has she seen it before? Either one is possible, but if you see how this combined with the fact that I said earlier when she attacks this doll, she doesn't she just kills it. The hammer is there. She could have picked up the hammer. She rips into it like a feral animal. And I do think that part of that is hinting that she has had to survive through some very harsh conditions. And this all, if you think about it, I didn't really state this explicitly in the last video, but if you think about it, this would all set up Six's journey all the way up to killing the lady, because she has had to become a monster to survive in this world, and by the time she gets to the lady, she has none of her humanity left. I do think that there is a clear progression here, and I do think that this is kind of a prequel game. A lot of people in the comments have been saying that they know for sure this is a prequel. I also don't think that that's true, but I do think that the events here lead into the events of the first game, and I'm going to explain in another video how I think the timeline of this game isn't as simple as most people are making it out to be. So a couple of things that I have noticed since I made that theory video and I went back through the school again. When we talk about the chess piece kid, or whatever you want to call him, I theorized that he was once alive and he was killed, and this person that is strapped to this chess piece was actually once a real boy. Now, there's more evidence to this as well. If you look around this room and outside this room, you can see this dog or a fox that appears to be drawn doing its business, and that is also found somewhere else in the school. It's found inside a locker. Now, this locker also has a slingshot in it, which can also be found in this room. Now, I think what this is a very, very subtle hint for is saying that this was that child's locker, which again would imply that he was one of the original students, because why would the porcelain dolls have lockers? They don't have possessions. They don't really seem to carry anything. They don't have their backpacks. They don't use them. They only use the lockers for mischief. So this really does imply to me that this was the chess piece kid's locker, and this was a bit of foreshadowing, but it's a nice little hint if you go back and play the game again. On top of that, there was another thing that I noticed in the teacher's room with all the organs in it. If you go around the room, you can see a number of organs. First of all, you can see the tentacle / intestine looking thing. Some people have said that it could be eels, which is very, very interesting, but they don't look like intestines. They're not quite squidgy enough for that. But also in another jar, you can see these little mushrooms that are growing, which look very similar to gnomes. Now, some mushrooms in the real world are pointed like this, and some people even called the gnomes mushroom men. I know that a lot of people, when they play it for the first time, will call those people mushroom men until they figure out they're actually called gnomes. I do think that's a clear little hint here, probably just a little Easter egg, but it is interesting how there is now a clear canonical link between mushrooms and the gnomes, or at least the mushrooms and the gnomes now exist in the same universe, which is a very interesting link. I also want to point out, if you watched my 10 things you might have missed video, a bunch of people in the comments have told me how to get the achievement. You can actually post the package if you wear the postman's hat. I don't know why I didn't think about that. I never really looked at the hats all that much, to be honest, but there we go. Still doesn't explain what it is. Who's the person that you're posting it to? Why does this seem so specific? It seems very odd that the developers would just throw this in for no reason. Like, I get it, it's an achievement, it's a secret, but what does it mean? The secret in the first game, in the DLC, where you had to line up the books with the picture of the lady on, that gave you a secret room, which didn't really appear to give you anything apart from hints, and I do think that this is also another one of those hints. I mean, if you look at those hands, they definitely look similar to kind of like Roger's hands, so maybe this is another tie to the Moor somehow, but I still really want to figure out what that is. But thank you so much for everyone who told me in the comments of the last video that that is how you unlock the achievement. I have that achievement now. You guys are awesome. You guys are smarter than me, so thank you very much. Now, I am going to be making a bunch more Little Nightmares 2 theory videos. Obviously, they're doing very well on the channel, but also I'm really enjoying making them. So there's going to be more of those kind of videos. So if you're enjoying these videos, don't forget to do all the usuals, like, comment, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.